You're listening to The Murder in My Family, brought to you by AbJack Entertainment. Be sure to check out some of the other great true crime podcasts from this network, including Missing Persons, DNA ID, Scene of the Crime, Zodiac Speaking,
Beyond Bizarre True Crime,
Citizen Detective,
and Campus Killings.
All of these podcasts are available for you to binge on right now, wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe where you're listening to this podcast so you don't miss an episode.
The views and opinions expressed by guests on this podcast do not necessarily represent those of the podcast, its host, or sponsors. If you would like to discuss the murder in your family on this podcast, please be sure to visit themurderinmyfamily.com for more information. You can support this podcast by visiting patreon.com/The Murder in My Family. This episode may contain unsettling material or subject matter. Listener discretion is advised.
This episode of The Murder in My Family is sponsored by GEDmatch, the free genealogy website where you can learn about your ancestry and find members you're related to through DNA. Not to mention, help catch the bad guys we talk about on the show. Thank you for joining me for this episode of The Murder in My Family. I'm your host, Mike Morford. In this episode, we'll be discussing the case of a man who is well-liked in his upscale community, a community not known for violent crimes, or much of any crime, really. Yet somehow, he wound up the victim of a brutal attack that left him to die alone in a quiet park. His case remains unsolved, and his killer is still walking free. We'll dive into this case after some quick housekeeping. Independent podcasts like this one depend on word of mouth to bring in new listeners. So if you find that you enjoy this show, please take a moment to rate and review it wherever you listen to your podcast. And be sure to introduce a friend to the show and invite them to listen. With your help, The Murder in My Family can continue to grow and reach a new audience. To learn more about the show or the cases we discuss, please visit themurderinmyfamily.com. You can also find us on Twitter with the handle @MurderMyFam or on Facebook at facebook.com/TMIMF podcast. If you'd like to support this show through a Patreon donation, it's always appreciated, and you can do so by visiting patreon.com/TheMurderMyFamily. Benefits of supporting the show on Patreon may include early access to ad-free episodes of the show, plus bonus content not heard in regular episodes. Support may also include thank you cards, stickers, and more. In each episode, I'll give shout-outs to any new supporters. And thank you to all of the supporters that generously donate to help keep the show growing and improving. One last note. Please support any of the sponsors that you hear on The Murder in My Family the way that those sponsors support the show. It's with our sponsor support that this show can go on and continue to provide a platform to share these stories with you in every episode. Thank you. And now on with the show. Paul Wilson was born in Boston to Hildegard and Charles Wilson. He had a sister, Elizabeth, and a brother, Charles. Paul graduated from Danvers High School in Danvers, Massachusetts, where he was active in many clubs and participated in band, stage band, orchestra, journalism club, pop rock concert, and intramural basketball, among other things. He received a bachelor's degree from the University of Massachusetts at Lowell and went on to become a software engineer for IBM. Paul made his home in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Home to Harvard University, Cambridge has a population of just over 100,000 people, and the city's been ranked as one of the safest cities in the state. Both property crime and violent crime are below the national average. It's an area where Paul, and just about everyone else there, live their daily lives with a feeling of security. Being a bachelor, Paul was able to fit in a lot of activities. He was an avid hiker who liked to hike at various national parks. He rode a motorcycle, was a huge sports fan, and was into astronomy. Paul was close with his sister Elizabeth, and he was best friends with her husband Ephraim, and Paul frequently spent time with them. On the night of January 2nd, 2019, 60-year-old Paul Wilson headed out around dinner time, presumably to go to one of his favorite nearby haunts, Whole Foods, to grab something for dinner. He never made it there. Just before 7 p.m. that night, Paul was found unconscious in a Cambridge park called Dannehy Park. He was lying on a paved path which was illuminated by a streetlight above him. Sadly, although he was rushed to a nearby hospital, Paul never woke up. And it turns out that this wasn't an accident. Paul hadn't fallen or tripped. It wasn't a natural death. He didn't have a heart attack or a stroke. It was determined that Paul had more than one blunt force injury to his head. Someone had attacked Paul with a blunt object as he walked through Danahy Park on his way to the nearby Whole Foods. To police, it didn't appear like a robbery because nothing of value was taken from Paul. Despite temperatures at or below freezing, Paul was found to be wearing a pair of shorts, as he always did no matter how cold it was outside, along with a winter hat, a pair of gloves, and a red coat. Police were tasked with finding the person who had attacked Paul and figuring out why they had taken his life, and it would prove to be a large task in a community not used to this kind of senseless violence. In retracking Paul's movements from that day, it seemed like it had been a normal day for him. He had taken a blue bike, which is one of Metro Boston's bike share bicycles, to work that morning. Paul had worked at IBM for many years, and it's likely they had taken blue bikes to work on many other occasions. He arrived back at Porter MBTA station and took the blue bike to Sherman Street near his house, where he parked the bike. From there, he headed through Danahy Park on his way to get dinner, and was attacked. By 6:45 p.m., he was lying on the ground, unresponsive. Paul, at 6 feet 6 inches, wasn't the type of target you'd think someone might choose to attack. He towered over most people that he came into contact with. The fact that he had blunt force trauma to the head means that someone was able to get close enough and able to overpower him. Paul regularly took an evening walk through Danahy Park, so it's possible that someone had watched him and learned his routine. Then again, Paul could have just been the victim of a random attacker. Again, robbery didn't seem to be a motive here. Paul wasn't carrying any kind of backpack or anything visible that someone might attack him for, and Paul usually paid for everything with Apple Pay, and he didn't carry cash. Police didn't have much to go on. In turning over the details of Paul's life, there was nothing there. No secrets, no known enemies, nothing. Desperate to catch killer and calm the community's fears, police asked for everyone that may have information or witnessed Paul's attack to come forward, but no one did. Middlesex District Attorney Marion Ryan thinks that there is someone out there who saw something important that night. She said to CBS News, "We know that there are lots of people out and about, and our hope is, really our belief is, that someone saw something and that they just don't appreciate the significance of what they saw." She also stressed that witnesses may not realize that they are witnesses, unaware that something or someone they saw that night may be part of this crime. Ryan added, "They may have seen or heard something that may seem insignificant, but given everything else we have, is the last piece of the puzzle." Today, more than 4 years after Paul was murdered, there have been no arrest. His unsolved murders left Cambridge on edge, and Paul's friends and family heartbroken. According to Boston.com, those who knew Paul remember him for his bright smile and friendly, outgoing personality. I think this opening from Tom Meeks, who was a friend of Paul's, in Cambridge Day, January 2019, really says it all. Quote, "Last week, a brutal crime took from our city one of its kindest, gentlest souls." Tom Meeks was a coworker of Paul's at IBM, and jokingly says that it was their love of wearing shorts no matter how cold the weather was that made them become friends. As of 2020, Paul's was one of 11 unsolved murders in Cambridge since 1999. Someone who's still in the area likely knows something, and both police and Paul's family urge you to do the right thing if you know something and come forward. If you have information about the murder of Paul Wilson, please call the Massachusetts State Police Investigations Unit at 781-897-6600, or call Cambridge Police at 617-349-3121. Paul's family has offered a $10,000 reward for information that leads to the identification of his killer. I sat down with Paul's sister Elizabeth and his brother-in-law and best friend Ephraim to discuss Paul's life and tragic death. That conversation is coming up in just a moment. This episode of The Murder of My Family is sponsored by GEDmatch. We've all heard the wonderful news of how genetic genealogy, along with GEDmatch, is helping to solve some terrible, long, cold murder cases. To date, GEDmatch has helped see over 500 cases resolved. Some of those very cases we've covered on the show before they were solved, including the cases of April Marie Tinsley, Lindy Sue Beekler, and Sherry Domingo and Greg Sanchez, who died at the hands of the Golden State Killer, Joseph D'Angelo. And hopefully with GEDmatch, there will be a lot more cases solved. GEDmatch isn't just catching the bad guys, though. It's also relied on to help identify Jane and John Does, and to help exonerate innocent people who are incarcerated for the wrong reasons. And this is where you come in, and you can help. Because the more DNA profiles uploaded into the GEDmatch database, the more chances there are to help bring justice to so many people. But GEDmatch is so much more. It's a free genealogy website where you can learn about your ancestry and find family members you're related to through DNA, even if you've tested using different companies. If you've already done a DNA test with a direct-to-consumer testing company like 23andMe, Ancestry, MyHeritage, or Family Tree DNA, it's easy to upload your DNA profile to GEDmatch, whether it's to help law enforcement provide justice for so many people that deserve it, or just to find your family roots. Here's how it works. First, go to the company website where you've had your DNA testing done and download your DNA profile as a DNA data file. Next, go to GEDmatch and upload the file for processing. Make sure to opt in for law enforcement searches that cover violent crimes and missing persons cases. If you want to just focus on being helpful to finding identities of unidentified bodies, you can simply opt out, which will exclude your profile from violent crime case searches. Within 24 hours of your upload, you'll have access to a suite of DNA tools allowing you to delve deeper into your results. You can compare your DNA profile to everyone else's on the site or to a specific person, plus much more. Some people have the misconception that law enforcement gets access to your raw DNA when you upload your profile, but that's not true. Law enforcement does not get to see your raw data when you consent to allow your data to be included in those types of searches. Law enforcement has the same access as any other civilian user of GEDmatch. They can only see your name or GEDmatch alias if you've entered one, your email address, and how much shared DNA there is between you and the unknown profile they've uploaded. GEDmatch is a highly secure site built with consumer security in mind, where users are in control of information they upload, and they can delete their data whenever they want. By joining the GEDmatch community, you can help see violent criminals brought to justice, missing people located, and unidentified remains given a name, not to mention dive into your family roots. Join GEDmatch today by going to gedmatch.com/MIMF. Once again, that's gedmatch.com/MIMF. With us today, we have Elizabeth and her husband, Ephraim, and they are here to discuss the murder of Elizabeth's brother, Paul Wilson. Thank you both for joining us.
You're welcome, Mike. It's good to be here.
Oh, thank you. So it's been 4 years this month since your brother was found beaten to death in a Cambridge, Massachusetts park. His case is still unsolved, and we want people to pay attention to the details and share his story, because there may be someone out there that has information that could lead to a resolution. Before we dive into the details of what happened to Paul, can you tell us a little bit more about Paul himself and maybe share some of your memories of him?
Oh, we have a lot. We have a lifetime. I'll start, and then my husband, who was Paul's best friend, can fill in a lot of the good stuff too. So
Perfect.
Paul was my older brother. He was born in 1958, so he was 60 when we lost him, and we grew up in Danvers, Massachusetts. My brother was into music, and he loved technology, and he used to launch those Estes rockets. I don't know if you're familiar with those, but those are like backyard rockets you could launch. He loved space, and his love of astronomy lasted his entire life. As a matter of fact, we're sitting in our family room next to several of his telescopes that he would use in the park that he was actually killed in behind his condominium in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and he would stargaze from the highest point in the park. He absolutely was so interested in what our universe was like and what it was like out there. But Paul was a bachelor. He never married, but he was the kind of guy, Mike, that was everybody's friend. He totally old school in the sense that when you met him, he paid attention to you. He would listen to you. He didn't pull out his phone and start scrolling or anything. He was entirely engrossed in anything, any interaction he had with you. He was that kind of a guy. He was always interested And that made him interesting. So Ephraim, why don't you talk a little bit about Paul? Because Paul and Ephraim were best friends and had many adventures and capers together.
I'm curious, how did you guys meet? Was Paul friends with Ephraim first, and that's how you met him, or they became friends after the two of you met?
Yeah, so my husband and I met at a technology company in Chelmsford, Massachusetts in 1990. And once Ephraim got to know Paul, they were like peas in a pod. Oh my gosh. So they had the same interests. They loved to talk about politics. They loved to talk about current events. They were huge sports fans. They rode their motorcycles together. They went on vacations together. Ephraim, you want to fill in the blanks?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of, it's hard to describe. After we got married, not that long afterwards, Paul came up one weekend to watch a football game. And the joke is, and he never stopped coming. We literally saw him every single weekend. Every Sunday he was up here. Sometimes on the Saturdays, we would go for motorcycle rides in the summer. Throughout the winter, we would just hang around and watch football games and whatever else was on. But we saw him, every single weekend. And that's not really, truly isn't an exaggeration. It'd be hard to imagine we didn't see him every weekend. And, he and I would text throughout the week too, whatever current events caught our attention. Some of it was, we were both shared a lot of interest. Like Elizabeth said, Paul was in high tech as well. So we could, kind of, share stories in various companies and things we've been at. Elizabeth did say that he had a ton of friends. And one of the things that was clear, unfortunately, after he passed, that we met a lot of his friends, was he was the best friend to a lot of people, truly their best friend. That they, it was remarkable that someone could have that role where, many people would say he's the best friend and be able to articulate why, that he got, he came to them when they were in the hospital, would visit them, for cancer treatment or whatever else was going on in their lives. He'd be part of it. So, he really did reach out. He had a really extended group of close friends. But as Elizabeth said, he and I were quite close. We spent, pretty much every weekend hanging out, doing something. Not that long, before he was taken, he and I went down to Austin and caught the Formula One race down there, which was a lot of fun. So, we had, we'd gone to Israel together as a family. We had other plans and other things to do. It's obviously Elizabeth's lost her brother, and for me, it was the kind of this best friend in life who I saw every week. So it's been quite a serious hole, I guess, in my life.
Yeah.
So it sounds like close-knit family. He was busy, just on the go, and a lot of stuff going on. And you found out after his death that he touched a lot of people. A lot of people were friends with him. So no enemies, no stories of anyone that disliked him or had any kind of grudges against him, anything like that?
No. And, the thing I'll, say is that after his death, you noted earlier, there was, a fair amount of publicity in the Boston area, because he lived in a very safe part of the city, or in the city itself, Cambridge. He was in a part of it that was very safe, or believed to be very safe. There's been nothing like that ever before. And so there was a lot of investigation. There was a huge amount of investigation by the local Cambridge police, by the state police. I think that there were some federal agencies brought in to help them as well. They had a lot of people working on it for a long amount of time. And as you can imagine, I think anyone could. Part of that is to do a very deep dive in someone's life to determine, if it was someone that they knew. And that they could know them either from work or family. It could be a spouse. It could be someone that they owed money to. It could be anything. They did a super deep dive, and all they could find is that he was exactly as we believed him to be, that he didn't have an enemy in the world. He didn't have anyone that didn't like him at work, didn't have anyone outside of work. So they could never find anything thread to pull on there. So, we did, unfortunately, we were able to get a very deep look into who all his friends were and if he had any enemies, and he had none.
And I think you made a very good point. When something like this happens, the microscope gets turned on into people's lives, looking for any kind of clue. And the fact there was nothing here, it's probably an uphill battle for police at that point, because if you can't find someone with a motive or a likely reason to harm someone, then that leads to the possibility that it's random. And I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, because it does seem like robbery wasn't a motive based on some facts. But why don't I let you sort of walk us through what happened that day back on January 2nd, 2019, what exactly it was that happened to Paul.
Well, we'll start with the fact that Ephraim texted him. They texted each other 2 hours before he was killed. So he had just spent his day at IBM. He was an IBM veteran, a career IBMer, right? I mean, 30, like engineer, 30 years. He was in Kendall Square in Cambridge, Mass. And then he took the subway, the Red Line, to Porter Square, where he rented a blue bike. That's one of those rental bikes. And the blue bike place where he lived in Cambridge, in North Cambridge, it was literally a half a block from his condominium. So from what we understand, he left his blue bike at the drop off. He went to his condo. This is probably around, say, 6 o'clock that night, 6 o'clock. So it's January 2nd. It's dark out. It's a cold night too. It's like 22 degrees. And he threw his wallet on the kitchen table. He left wearing his iWatch, and he had his Apple phone with him, his iPhone. Now, my brother was the kind of guy who wore shorts, Mike, all year round. Even with, 20-degree weather, he was just the shorts guy. And the only time we ever saw him wearing anything but shorts is when he rode his motorcycle with Ephraim. But in any event, he left his condo. The last known video of him is the video from the Montessori school that was adjacent to the entrance to Danahy Park that he used, saw him going in. The park path is very wide and it's very well lit. It's probably a lamppost, street light type thing every 50 feet. And it's a very well-traveled path that cuts from one side of the park to the other. And that park is very heavily used. And even on January 2nd, people were coming and going, certainly not the kind of traffic you'd see in warmer weather. But he had made it to the other side of the park. And after that, we don't know what happened, Mike. All we know is that a 911 call came in at 6:47 p.m. that there was an unresponsive male lying under the street light on the path in Danahy Park on the New Street side, which is the side that then takes you over to where he would go pretty much every evening for dinner. He would go to Whole Foods and he would get a salad with some kind of protein. And I'm positive that's where my brother was headed. And all the first responders showed up. He had suffered a traumatic blunt force trauma to the back of his head. My brother was 6'6". So I just don't even know. It must have pushed him down. And he was taken to Beth Israel Hospital, but he did not survive. And he was pronounced dead at 10:20 p.m. And at 11 o'clock that night, the police in my town showed up at my house to tell me that my brother had been killed. And I was sound asleep, and my husband was up, and I remember him opening the door to our bedroom, and he was like backlit by the hallway light. And he just said, "Elizabeth, the Chester police are here to talk to you about your brother." And I remember sitting up and thinking, oh my God, this can't be happening, because I knew something horrible had happened. And I walked down the hall, and I came down the stairs, and I saw the police officer who I knew. And I just looked at him and I said, "Please don't tell me my brother's dead." And he said, "I'm so sorry, but he's deceased." And I think after that, I don't remember much. I know I collapsed on the floor, and I think I howled like a wounded animal. I couldn't even believe it.
It's got to be, heartbreaking news to get in the middle of the night, and not just that he was dead, but then to find out that it wasn't an accident or something like that he was attacked.
Yep.
Yeah, that I don't think that night they just said that he was deceased. It wasn't until the next day when we were, I
had to call the detective.
Yeah, they just said to call the detectives. And it was, I remember that night, very clearly, and we didn't know what it was, right? I think we were thinking that maybe it was, a physical thing, right? Heart attack or stroke, but it wasn't immediately until we contacted detectives, which could have been later that night.
It was that night. Yeah,
we
it was that
that it had been a murder, and that it wasn't natural causes. So it kind of felt like I felt like it happened twice. Once was losing Paul, and then the second was understanding the actual circumstances.
So that's got to, what goes through your mind when you say, wait a minute, this is a guy that's well liked, he's got no problems with anyone, you find this out, what goes through your mind at that moment?
Complete shock and disbelief, just like, what the hell happened? And I asked the detectives, "Can you tell me what happened? What in the world? Did he have an interaction with somebody? Did somebody jump him? Was someone trying to rob him?" It was 6:30, 6:27 at night. It's dinner time. What do you mean he was attacked? By whom? For what reason? I just remember being completely like, nothing made sense to me. It made no sense, especially since I had mentioned my brother's 6'6", big, tall guy, not afraid of anything or anyone. He wasn't a tough guy in that sort of sense, but who would have messed with him?
Very, and we get back to the point that some of the stuff was found with him that seemed to indicate it wasn't a robbery. Is that correct? What things again were found with him?
Okay, so the only thing that he had on him was his Apple Watch and his Apple phone. He had left his wallet in his condo. So none of this makes any sense. It doesn't, I don't, pretty much the police have said to me and my family that they can account for his movements up till like the last 5 to 7 minutes of his life. Because unfortunately, there are no cameras in the Cambridge Park.
Well, maybe there should be as a result of this.
You would think so, but unfortunately, that is up to the people of Cambridge. And they helped craft the surveillance policy with the ACLU, and don't believe it's appropriate for any government to be filming you without your consent. So in a public place like Danahy Park, there are no cameras.
Well, it's a public place. That's the thing. I think if it's a public place, then you're out in public you sort of, the consent thing maybe goes out the window. But again, not to get into a whole side argument over that, but if they're protecting their citizens and looking out for the citizens, you think that would be something they would want to have there? And in this case, maybe it would have helped lead to some answers.
Yeah. One of the things I thought, because I've been in tech for quite a while, was that, notwithstanding that the park wouldn't have surveillance necessarily, but I felt at the time, I felt pretty certain that all the properties that ringed the park would be, armed for bear with ring cameras and nest cameras and everything else. And I thought that, for sure, they were going to, with such a tight time frame, that there was going to be, within a day or two, some video footage that came off of something somewhere that gave them a starting point. And the police, I mean, they invested a ton of manpower in this. They went out, I think, a half a mile direction around the entire park, knocking on every single door. And they didn't find a ton of video. I guess that the disdain for video, it may extend not just beyond municipality, but maybe into the people's lives themselves. But they did find some video, and they couldn't get anything off of it. They didn't see it. They weren't able to find anyone walking around, driving. They found nothing off of that. They spent a ton of time, like I said, not just knocking on doors and asking people. They kept returning to the park and going up to people and asking them if they'd seen anything over and over again, to see if they could find anyone that had gone through the park, had potentially seen something. It was as the time went on, it became more and more like they looked over and over again to see if they could find any indication of a weapon. Of course, Paul's body was examined, for any kind of DNA or anything. And they've done a whole bunch of things, even beyond that, and nothing has come up. Absolutely nothing. And I thinking from the perspective of a person in tech, I have a pretty good indication of a pretty good idea of a lot of things you can do from a technical perspective. People leave an awful lot of digital information behind, and not just the potential assailant here, but anyone that could have been in the park as a potential witness that didn't want to come forward, which is not unusual. They were looking for those people. They were basically following a lot of digital breadcrumbs to try and find if there was anyone that was in there that could have potentially seen something. And to this date, 4 years later, they haven't found anything.
And how big a park is this again?
I'm trying to think in terms of acres. It's hard for me.
It's large.
It's pretty large.
It's large.
It's not like a single square block. I would.
It's got multiple soccer fields. It's got a pond. It's got a dog park. It's got I think it's got tennis courts or something. It was built in Cambridge a long time ago on top of basically a reclaimed landfill. So you can imagine, how large a landfill might be, and then basically reclaimed the whole thing and then built a park on top of it. So,
and it's Cambridge. Doesn't sound like it's an area where there's a lot of crime. Seems like a pretty good area. Is there any history of anybody being mugged, anything like that in that park?
I think,
Mike, the only thing we could find was 8 years earlier. So someone had been assaulted, but nothing like what happened to my brother has happened before then. And nothing like that has happened since. And we even looked up the statistics for homicide in Cambridge. They average 1 homicide a year. It is consistently one of the top 10 safest cities in the United States. I mean, Harvard's there, MIT, it's a billion, tech startups and tech companies. Elizabeth Warren lives there. It's a very vibrant, considered safe city.
Yeah, just that's when I heard Cambridge, when I first started reading a little bit about this, I was like, hey, that's a pretty good area. And this kind of thing doesn't happen there. And again, with the seemingly randomness of it, if there's no one within his inner circle, anyone he knows that they can connect the dot to, then that leads it to being random. And if he wasn't robbed and it was random, then what did happen? That there's got to be a million questions in your mind that you've gone over countless times.
There are. Just what really happened? Did he have an interaction with someone? Did someone stop him? Did someone hide in the bushes and jump on him? Was it a gang initiation? Was it someone who had a psychotic break with reality and thought my brother was Godzilla or something? I don't know. Unfortunately, the police can't answer that. And we just are left with really nothing.
We did talk a little bit about this case has gotten a good amount of press compared to a lot of cases that I cover. And despite what is a $10,000 reward, there's no one that's come forward with that piece of the puzzle that solves this case. How frustrating is that?
It's frustrating because the common thing, and it's not, even the folks in law enforcement we talk to will echo the same thing, I think, is that it just doesn't make any sense. And you can keep saying that, and everything you look at, you keep saying it makes no sense. It makes no sense that you would randomly attack someone 6'6". Wouldn't you wait for someone who's a little bit smaller when they're walking through the park? It makes no sense where it happened in this very safe park. But on top of that, and we didn't really touch on this earlier, but it was under a street light next to a small parking lot. Yeah. If you were going to commit a random act of violence, you couldn't pick a worse place in a sense to do it. You were under a light, so anyone in the park could see you under that light, and it was in a parking lot right off of a major street. So if someone just was pulling in to walk their dog, there you would be, right? So it is everything about it, the location. You just check through everything, and it says it makes no sense. Makes no sense. The follow up after that has included looking for any kind of a pattern in the state of Massachusetts, in New England, and maybe even broader of any other kind of a random crime, and they can't tie anything to it. So it's the frustration is it's though it happened and whoever perpetrated it just disappeared. We've thought for a while after the initial surge of investigation that, well, if it's someone that has a propensity for violence, eventually they're going to end up in the criminal system. They'll probably run their mouth. This is what typically happens, apparently, and then someone will give them up for some favorable sentencing, and we'll get some resolution that way. But nothing's ever happened. We've never heard anything. It's been 4 years, so.
And unfortunately, I cover a lot of cases too, where somebody commits a violent crime and never does it again. You would think that, now I don't know, I don't want to get off shoot here and say that this is a serial killer or anything like that, but a lot of times I cover crimes that are just horrendous, and by the details you think, okay, this must be some kind of serial killer, and when they're identified, they're going to have a bunch of crimes under their belt, and most of the time they never do it again. So that's surprising. But it is a reality that I see quite a bit, that a lot of these people that do bad crimes don't have a history. Now, this person may very well turn out to have some criminal history, but I think what's very unfortunate is the fact that there's no surveillance. If they did DNA, it doesn't appear to have led to anything. So at that point, what are you left with? What are your hopes? How hopeful are you that this case is going to be solved?
Well, that's a really good question, Mike. I very well understand that there is no evidence, right? Like, there is no murder. They tore that park apart. They never found the murder weapon. Any DNA was strictly my brother's. The killer did not leave any behind. There's no video. There's no witnesses. And there's no one that's come forward, and it's been 4 years. I have sort of changed my outlook from having hope, which unfortunately can be very dangerous for me because it's so far led to just disappointment, to circumstances may change. And that is the way I kind of think of it now. Circumstances may change. Somebody has to talk. That is the only way I see my brother's case ever getting any traction, that someone talks. And in order for that to happen, perhaps the circumstance has to change. Because if someone's capable of killing a stranger, I mean, from what I understand, most murders are committed by people who know each other. It's kind of rare that there would be a random murder, or at least rarer. Maybe this person is violent, is crazy, and whoever knows something is just too scared of them to say something. But maybe a circumstance will change.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because maybe someone that knows something is afraid to come forward and saying, hey, if he did this to him, what will he do to me? But then again, if that person, passes away, or they go to jail for something else, then maybe that person will say, okay, I feel safe to come forward now. Or maybe they can come forward with the police giving them some kind of protection, saying, hey, if you testify and tell us what you know, we'll get this person off the street. But it's frustrating that as of now, that hasn't happened. And with the publicity and with the reward, someone hasn't been able to come forward so far and share that information that solves the case.
Yeah, it is.
I just want to ask you if the person that is involved in this is out there listening, what would you want to say to them?
Mike, I guess I'd ask them why. And maybe they can't tell me why. Oh, I was high on drugs, or I needed money, or your brother gave me some lip, or I don't even know if I believe what they tell me. I don't know, but I want to know why. I think we spend a lot of our lives trying to make sense of things. And because this is so senseless, that's the hardest thing for me to live with. It's why. Why did you kill my brother? What did he do to you? You didn't even know him. And do you have any idea what it's done to those of us left behind? That's what Ephraim?
Yeah, I don't, it's knowing who did it, what were circumstances leading up to it. I think Phil's would be important to understand why. I think that, we've had plenty of time to talk about it. I think it'll also make it harder, if that makes any sense. It'll make it harder because we'll know, if it was truly random, that if the person had gotten on a different train, subway, that they would have been there 10 minutes later or 10 minutes earlier. Who knows, right? All that kind of stuff is that conspired, and maybe going all the way back to how they were brought up, or what happened the night before. All of it conspired to this random event. Either that or everyone missed something, and which I don't think is the case. So it's just right now, I think for us, it's still surreal, because it's people talk about the perfect crime, and in this case, it almost feels like that, because they said the amount of effort that was put in was, like you said, it was a very well recognized case. I guess it was in obviously on all the news for multiple days and weeks. The people in the town in Cambridge did not let it drop. They had been pushing the police over and over again about it. They had a very significant amount of resources to expend on it. Cambridge is let's face it, it's a wealthy city with a large and well-funded police department. They had the help of federal agencies. I mean, there was no stone left unturned. I mean, And yet we know nothing. Nothing in terms of who did it, and still not a single witness. I mean, if you had been within a quarter of a mile where it happened, and you'd ordered a Domino's pizza online or swiped on Tinder, you would have gotten a call from the Cambridge Police and the Massachusetts State Police. Because it's essentially a digital dragnet that was run. I mean, it's just the amount of effort that was put into this. And from a technology perspective, I also, asked them about things in terms of sweeping cell tower records and stuff. They did everything and nothing, not just no potential assailant, but no witnesses. They couldn't find a single person. And it wasn't just by putting up flyers. It was by, sweeping through all the electronic records you could to see if there was anyone that was geolocated at that time. And to me, it's still, statistically, it seems almost impossible given the amount of people that are usually in and out of that park. It's just very strange.
Very frustrating. Well, we'll definitely share, the tip line information, put the reward out there and stuff so that people can come forward if they have information. Is there a website or a social media page set up for Paul's case?
No.
Okay. Well, we'll definitely share what we can to get people coming forward with information if they have it. And I just want to ask you one last question as we wrap up. When people hear Paul's name or think of Paul, what is it that you want his legacy to be? What do you want people to remember him for?
I think he was genuinely a happy person. Like, he was always laughing and joking. Always. He was a guy that, and that's why he had so many friends. He was a genuinely happy person that really enjoyed his life, and also extremely well versed in everything from pop culture to you name it, pop culture to pop politics to whatever. So he could engage people at all kinds of different topics, but also he was, generally a fun person to be around. And that's why, there's so many people that it's not just us. There's just a very, there's an extended group of people that miss him terribly. And we met a lot of them at his memorial service. I still see them, in the social media world, and they still post pictures of them out with him. When they're reminded of something, you'll just see a lot of people remembering their time with Paulie, or like we do, we look forward. We think about, and so some days we can laugh about how Paulie and I would joke about something that's happening right now as if he was sitting with us in the room. But he was just always had a smile on his face. Yeah. Always was a happy, outgoing guy.
He was everybody's friend.
Yep.
I don't think a real loss for yourselves and for the community then to lose something like that.
Yeah.
I hope somehow that you do find out who did this and that they're held accountable. And please reach back out to me if you get any more developments. I'd love to hear that there's some kind of resolution.
Thank you. We hope so too.
Thank you so much. Thank you once again for joining me for this episode of The Murder of My Family. I'd like to thank Sonny Landon for writing and research assistance in this episode. We'll be back here soon with an all-new episode of The Murder of My Family, and I hope you'll join me for it. But before you go, remember that every murder victim means something to somebody.